Every morning, before the world gets a hold of you, you get to program your mind. You get to set the tone. What you say to yourself in those first few moments doesn't just affect your mood. It literally affects your brain. Here are 10 powerful things to tell yourself every morning. Not just to feel good, but to build the kind of mental circuitry that leads to growth, control, and clarity. I am in control of my mind. This is where it all starts. Your thoughts aren't random. They're responsive. And when you remind yourself that you're in control, your brain stops reacting and starts leading. You shift from survival to strategy. My actions today define my future. Neuroscience confirms it. Consistent behavior rewires your brain. Every decision you make today sends a message to your future self. That means even small choices matter. I am not my emotions. I am the observer of them. Feelings come and go, but your awareness remains. When you separate your identity from emotion, your brain becomes more resilient. You don't drown, you analyze, respond, and grow. Discomfort is a signal, not a stop sign. Your brain often confuses discomfort with danger. But when you reframe it as a growth signal, you train your nervous system to stay calm and focused even when things get hard. I'm not behind. I'm becoming. Comparison is the enemy of progress. When you remind yourself that growth isn't linear, you train your brain to focus on progress over perfection. I can choose my response to anything. Between stimulus and response, there is space. And in that space is your power. This is cognitive freedom, the ability to pause, process, and choose. That's where your transformation begins. My brain is built to adapt. Neuroplasticity is real. Every repetition of thought, of effort, of discipline shapes your mind. You are not fixed. You are a work in progress. Focus is my superpower. In a world of noise, clarity is strength. The ability to stay locked in on your goals, your tasks, your mission literally strengthens the brain's prefrontal cortex, making you more efficient, more aware, more powerful. Failure is data, not identity. Your brain learns by trial and error. Mistakes are not setbacks, they're signal posts. If you listen, adapt, and adjust, failure becomes fuel. I am becoming the architect of my reality. Your thoughts are blueprints. Your habits are tools. Your consistency is the foundation. When you say this to yourself every morning, you activate the systems in your brain responsible for goal setting, persistence, and discipline. Say these not like a wish, but like a command. Not with doubt, but with certainty. Because the science is clear, the words you repeat are instructions to your brain. Instructions it will follow. So speak with intention, think with purpose, and rise with power. Each morning is a chance to rewire the mind for clarity, courage, and control. So before you check your phone, check in with yourself. You are not a passenger in this life. You are the driver. Morning self-talk shapes the neural circuitry for focus, resilience, and emotional regulation. This isn't just a motivational idea. It's a principle rooted in neuroscience. The words you say to yourself in the first minutes of your day are not merely affirmations. They are electrical signals that trigger chemical changes in your brain. These changes influence how you perceive reality, how you regulate emotions, and how you respond to challenges. It's not about thinking positive in a vague, feel-good way. It's about the actual architecture of your brain and the power you have to shape it through intention and repetition. When you first wake up, your brain is in a highly suggestible state. Your cortisol levels are elevated, not in a harmful way, but as a natural response to help your body wake up and focus. This window is critical. It's the moment when your brain is highly receptive to input, when your internal dialogue can either amplify anxiety or initiate control. If the first thing you do is reach for your phone, scroll through chaos, or rehearse yesterday's stress, you reinforce neural circuits associated with stress and distraction. But if you instead pause, breathe, and speak to yourself with intention, you start laying the groundwork for a more regulated, more focused mind. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, decision-making, and emotional regulation, is deeply affected by what you repeatedly tell yourself. It's not static, it's plastic. That means it can change based on how you use it. Morning self-talk activates this region, strengthening its connections with the limbic system, which handles emotion, and the motor cortex, which drives behavior. When you speak to yourself with clarity, resolve, and purpose, you begin aligning emotion, thought, and action. That alignment is the birthplace of true discipline and resilience. Think about it, your brain is like a garden. Every word you say is a seed. Some words grow weeds, self-doubt, fear, procrastination. Other words grow strength, confidence, and forward movement. If you keep telling yourself, I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed, I'm not ready, your brain will start scanning the environment to validate those thoughts. It's called the reticular activating system, RAS, and its job is to filter information and focus your attention on what matches your internal narrative. But when you start your day saying, I am in control, I am capable, I am becoming stronger, the RAS begins filtering reality through that lens. You start noticing opportunities instead of threats. You start solving problems instead of fearing them. You begin behaving like someone who is ready to grow. There's also a powerful hormonal component. Positive self-talk can influence levels of dopamine and serotonin, two neurotransmitters critical for motivation, mood, and well-being. By framing your day with empowering language, you increase the likelihood of engaging in behaviors that further boost those chemicals: movement, focus, social connection. It becomes a feedback loop. Your words shape your brain shapes your behavior, and your behavior reinforces your identity. And it's not just about motivation, it's about regulation. Life will always bring stress. That's not avoidable. But how you respond to that stress depends largely on your baseline emotional state. When your brain is grounded by intentional self-talk, it's less reactive. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, becomes less dominant. You become more capable of pausing before reacting, of processing before speaking, of thinking before deciding. This is emotional regulation at the neural level, not by chance, but by design. Resilience is not just a trait, it's a trained ability. And that training starts every morning. When you tell yourself, I can handle whatever comes, you are not lying to yourself. You are preloading your mind with a framework that promotes calm, adaptability, and focus. Over time, this becomes your default mode. Not because life is easier, but because your brain is better prepared. It's also essential to understand that your brain loves patterns. It finds safety in the familiar. So if your self-talk is consistently negative, your brain will resist change, even if that change is good for you. But through consistent, repeated morning affirmations, you can override that resistance. You can create new circuits that become your new normal. At first, it may feel fake, but repetition builds belief, and belief drives behavior. Even the simple act of standing upright, breathing deeply, and speaking a powerful phrase out loud, like, I am focused and ready to lead, sends signals to your nervous system. It tells your vagus nerve to calm down, your heart rate to stabilize, and your brain to enter a state of alert but not alarmed focus. This is where your best decisions come from. This is where your performance peaks. Don't underestimate the simplicity of this practice. People often dismiss self-talk as too basic or too soft. But the truth is, it's one of the most neurologically impactful things you can do, and you get to do it daily. No cost, no equipment, just presence and intention. The way you speak to yourself is the foundation for how you treat yourself. And how you treat yourself determines what you believe you deserve. If you wake up telling yourself you're behind, unworthy, or out of control, your brain will follow. But if you wake up telling yourself that you are building, becoming, and in command, your brain will follow that too. This is not about lying to yourself. It's about choosing which version of yourself you want to strengthen. The one driven by fear and autopilot, or the one guided by focus and purpose. Every morning is a chance to take control, to train your brain, to regulate your emotions, to sharpen your focus. You don't need motivation to start, just commitment. Speak with intention and your brain will adapt. Speak with clarity and your behavior will align. The science is clear. Your words are not just sounds. They are signals. Signals that rewire your mind, recalibrate your emotions, and reshape your life. So start tomorrow differently. Before the noise, before the world, speak. Remind your brain who's in charge, and let that voice guide your day. Intentional affirmations activate the prefrontal cortex, enhancing decision-making and motivation. This isn't just an inspirational idea. It is backed by solid neuroscience. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain located right behind the forehead, is responsible for higher-order thinking, planning, self-control, and goal setting. When you intentionally speak affirmations, specific, present tense, and purposeful statements, you're engaging this powerful region of the brain in a way that enhances its function. You are not just thinking positively, you are sharpening the very system that drives focus, clarity, and direction in your life. The brain is designed to conserve energy. It seeks efficiency, not necessarily excellence. Left untrained, it will default to old patterns, emotional reactions, and autopilot behaviors. That's where intentional affirmations come in. They act as cognitive cues, giving your brain fresh instructions. Instead of recycling yesterday's doubts, you create a script that trains your mind to aim higher and think more clearly. When you say something like, I am focused on progress, not perfection, or every step I take today matters, your prefrontal cortex lights up, creating new pathways that support executive function. Studies have shown that self-affirmation activates brain regions involved in self-processing and valuation. This means your brain begins to assign importance and emotional value to the affirmations you repeat. The more you affirm your values, your purpose, and your intentions, the more likely your brain is to prioritize behaviors aligned with those affirmations. You start making better choices, not because you're forcing yourself, but because your brain is now operating from a place of internal alignment. It becomes easier to delay gratification, resist distractions, and stick to plans. Not because of willpower, but because of neural priming. Affirmations are often misunderstood as wishful thinking or empty positivity. But the truth is, when they are intentional, specific, grounded in values, and repeated consistently, they become one of the most effective tools for rewiring the brain. Intentional affirmations require clarity. You must decide what you stand for, what you want, and who you are becoming. That level of clarity itself enhances activity in the prefrontal cortex, reinforcing the neural circuits responsible for vision, discipline, and long-term thinking. Consider this. Every time you speak an affirmation with conviction, you are running a mental simulation. You're showing your brain a picture of the future you want to create. The brain, particularly the prefrontal cortex, doesn't easily distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and real ones. This is why elite athletes visualize their performance before a game. It primes the neural circuits involved in execution. In the same way, when you affirm, "I make clear, confident decisions," your brain begins mapping out what that looks and feels like. It's no longer a vague desire, it becomes a rehearsed behavior. Motivation is not magic, it is chemistry. Dopamine, the brain's motivation molecule, is closely linked to goal-directed behavior and reward anticipation. When you use affirmations to focus your mind on progress, growth, and purpose, you stimulate dopamine release. This gives you the mental energy to act. The beauty of this is that the dopamine spike doesn't just come after you achieve a goal. It can be triggered in the pursuit when your brain believes you are on the right track. Intentional affirmations reinforce that belief. They tell your brain, "I'm moving forward," and the brain responds with motivation to keep going. In everyday life, you are faced with countless decisions. Many of them are subtle, whether to keep scrolling or start the work, whether to speak up or stay silent, whether to procrastinate or take action. These micro decisions are governed largely by your prefrontal cortex. If it is underactive due to stress, fatigue, or mental clutter, your decisions will default to whatever is easiest or most familiar. Intentional affirmations practiced daily help activate and strengthen this region so that it can make more intentional choices even under pressure. You train your brain to pause, think, and act with direction. Affirmations also have the power to reframe stress. Life brings pressure, deadlines, uncertainty, conflict. Under stress, the brain can switch from the prefrontal cortex to the amygdala, which handles fear and threat detection. But intentional affirmations serve as a grounding tool, pulling your attention back to what matters. When you affirm, "I respond to stress with calm and clarity," you are engaging the prefrontal cortex to override emotional reactivity. Over time, this builds emotional resilience, not just a sense of feeling better, but actual cognitive control. Repetition is key. The brain doesn't change with one powerful thought. It changes through repetition, reinforcement, and belief. You have to say it until your brain believes it, until your decisions begin to reflect it, until your behavior naturally aligns with it. Think of affirmations like strength training. Each repetition adds a layer of strength to your mental circuitry. You may not notice the shift immediately, but over time, the changes are undeniable. You start showing up with more energy, making clear choices, bouncing back faster from setbacks. That's not magic, that's neural training. You also begin to feel a deeper sense of identity. And this matters because behavior follows identity. If you identify as someone who lacks focus, who always gives up, who's unsure, your brain will find ways to confirm that. But if you begin to affirm daily and with purpose, "I am focused, I follow through, I lead myself with discipline," your brain will begin filtering reality to match that script. You're not just saying words, you are changing your operating system. What's essential is that your affirmations are believable to you. They should challenge you, but not feel fake. If "I am a millionaire" feels like a fantasy, then start with "I am building the skills and mindset that create wealth." That statement is more believable and engages your brain's goal, setting systems more effectively. Affirmations should stretch your thinking, not break it. The goal is not to escape reality, but to train your brain to respond to reality with more strength and focus. In this way, intentional affirmations are both a mental rehearsal and a form of self-leadership. You are instructing your brain each morning on what to value, what to prioritize, and how to respond. You are not waiting for motivation. You are generating it through structure and repetition. You are not wishing for clarity. You are creating it with language and belief. That's what separates vague self-help from grounded, scientific self-growth. The power is in your voice. The tone you set in the morning echoes throughout your day. It determines whether you spiral into distraction or rise into discipline, whether you feel helpless or take command. It starts with words, but it leads to choices. And those choices shape everything. So tomorrow and every morning after that, speak with intention. Affirm with clarity. And let your brain follow your lead. You're not just setting the tone, you're shaping the structure. You're not just inspiring yourself, you're rewiring your future. Repetition builds neural pathways. What you say to yourself daily becomes what you believe. This is not just a poetic concept. It is one of the core principles of neuroscience. The brain wires itself based on experience, especially repeated experience. The more often a thought is repeated, the stronger the neural pathway associated with that thought becomes. Over time, these repeated signals create circuits of habit, not only in behavior, but in emotion, identity, and perception. You become what you repeat. This means your daily inner dialogue is not harmless background noise. It is shaping the very structure of your mind. When a thought travels through your brain for the first time, it's like walking through a dense forest, slow, uncertain, unfamiliar. But when you think that same thought over and over again, it's like walking the same trail every day. The brush gets cleared, the ground gets packed, and the path becomes smoother, faster, automatic. That is how neural pathways work. It's called long-term potentiation, the process by which repeated signals between neurons strengthen their connection. The stronger the connection, the easier and faster the thought travels. Eventually, you don't have to try to think it. It becomes a reflex. This is how beliefs are born. So when you say things like, "I'm not good enough," "I always fail," or "I'll never change," and you say them often, your brain doesn't question them. It reinforces them. It begins to associate those statements with your identity. It filters your experiences through that lens. Even when evidence contradicts the thought, your brain clings to it because the pathway is strong. This is why changing your mindset is not just about saying something positive once. It's about saying it consistently, especially when it feels hardest to believe. Repetition is the secret to neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. Every time you repeat a positive affirmation or constructive belief, you're laying down a new path in your brain. At first, it may feel unnatural or awkward. That's normal. Your brain is used to the old path. But with each repetition, the new path gets clearer. Neurons that fire together wire together. The more you say, "I am calm under pressure," the more your brain begins to associate stressful situations with composure rather than panic. The more you say, "I can figure things out," the more your brain activates problem-solving circuits instead of fear-based reactions. This is why morning routines matter. When you begin your day with repeated affirmations or declarations, you're priming your neural pathways for the rest of the day. You're giving your brain a blueprint. Without that intentional input, the brain will default to whatever is most familiar, which for many people is worry, distraction, or self-doubt. Repetition builds familiarity. And in the brain, familiarity often equals truth. That's the paradox. Something doesn't have to be true to be believed. It just has to be repeated enough. The power of repetition also explains why negative self-talk is so damaging. If you repeatedly tell yourself that you're lazy, broken, or unlucky, your brain starts to embed those beliefs. And once they're embedded, they influence every aspect of your life. Your choices, your relationships, your career. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, not because of fate, but because your brain is acting on the instructions you've given it over and over again. But the reverse is equally true. If you begin to repeat a new story, one built on growth, strength, and possibility, your brain begins to shift. It doesn't happen instantly, and it doesn't happen without resistance. But the science is clear: repetition over time equals rewiring. The brain doesn't care whether what you're saying is good or bad. It just responds to what is consistent. That gives you incredible power, because it means you can change your brain, change your beliefs, and change your life through the disciplined act of repetition. It's important to note that repetition alone is not enough. You must also attach emotional intensity to what you repeat. Emotions act as neural glue. When you say something with conviction, with passion, with feeling, your brain takes notice. It flags the moment as important. This is why shouting an affirmation in a powerful posture is more effective than whispering it passively. Your body and emotion become part of the process. The more vividly you repeat something, the deeper it gets wired into your nervous system. You also strengthen repetition through variety and context. Saying the same phrase 100 times in one sitting is not as effective as saying it in different situations throughout the day, during stress, during action, during reflection. Every time you repeat a belief in a new context, you generalize it. Your brain learns this isn't just true in the morning, it's true in meetings, in workouts, in challenges. That's how repetition becomes identity. It goes from a phrase you say to a truth you live. One of the most empowering truths is that the brain does not distinguish between who you are and who you are becoming. It simply responds to what you repeat. If you consistently repeat, I am becoming more focused each day, your brain treats that as your reality and begins reinforcing behaviors that support it. You're not pretending, you're programming. You're not faking confidence, you're building the neural foundation for it to grow. Consistency is the bridge between who you are and who you want to be. It's not the complexity of what you say, it's the frequency and intensity. Even a simple phrase like, I show up every day, can transform your mindset if said with conviction and repeated daily. Over time, your brain begins to expect that behavior. You begin to feel out of sync when you don't act in alignment with that affirmation. That's the sign the rewiring is working. Repetition is also critical for breaking old patterns. When a negative thought arises, you can't just suppress it, you must replace it. And replacement only works through repetition. If every time a doubt appears, you respond with a rehearsed, repeated truth like, I'm learning and improving, you begin to overwrite the old circuit. It's like laying new track for a train. At first it wants to go the old route, but with enough repetition, the new track becomes the default. Ultimately, repetition is how you teach your brain what matters. It's how you shift from chaos to clarity, from reaction to regulation. Every time you repeat a powerful truth, you are building the architecture of a better mind. Not through force, but through frequency. Not through luck, but through design. What you say to yourself daily is not trivial. It is transformational. Your repeated thoughts are shaping your self-image, your decisions, your resilience, and your future. You are quite literally building the person you will become one repetition at a time. The brain responds to vision. When you visualize a goal with emotional intensity, you engage your brain's goal-setting system. This system, often referred to in neuroscience as the default mode network and the salience network, plays a critical role in how we imagine the future and assign importance to it. Your brain is not simply a machine reacting to the world. It is constantly predicting, planning, and filtering information based on what it believes is relevant. And one of the strongest signals you can give it is a clear, emotionally charged vision of your desired future. When you take the time each morning to visualize your goals, not just vaguely, but with clarity and feeling, you begin activating brain regions such as the prefrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex. These areas are involved in focus, motivation, and conflict resolution. They help determine what you should pay attention to, what actions are necessary, and how to overcome obstacles. Visualization essentially tells the brain, this matters, this is who I am becoming. The brain responds by aligning your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors toward that image. The process of visualization is not imaginary in the brain's eyes. When you vividly imagine something, whether it's giving a speech, finishing a race, or launching a project, your brain activates many of the same neural circuits as if you were actually performing the action. This phenomenon is known as functional equivalence. It's why athletes visualize success before stepping onto the field. Their muscles may not be moving, but their nervous system is already preparing for performance. You can use the same power, not just to imagine, but to prime yourself for growth. Emotion is the glue that makes visualization stick. You can look at a picture of your dream life every day, but if you don't feel anything when you see it, your brain doesn't mark it as significant. But when you pair your vision with emotion, when you feel the excitement, the pride, the gratitude as if it's already real, your brain starts tagging that image as important. The limbic system, especially the amygdala and hippocampus, helps encode that emotional memory and reinforce the belief that the vision is attainable and urgent. A key component of this process is the reticular activating system, or RAS. This is a bundle of neurons in your brainstem that acts like a filter, determining what information enters your conscious awareness. The RAS is always scanning your environment, and it uses your internal priorities, often shaped by repetition and visualization, to decide what's relevant. When you repeatedly visualize your goals with emotion, your RAS starts working in your favor. It begins noticing opportunities, resources, and connections that align with your vision, even if you would have overlooked them before. Vision creates focus. It tells your brain what to ignore and what to pursue. In a world full of distractions, the person with the clearest internal vision has the greatest external discipline. When you begin your day with mental rehearsal, seeing yourself speak with confidence, work with energy, face challenges with courage, you are not fantasizing. You are conditioning your nervous system to expect that version of yourself. The clearer the image, the more natural the behavior becomes. Your brain does not need you to be perfect. It needs you to be consistent and clear. Vision also has the power to override fear. Many people hesitate not because they lack skill, but because they can't see beyond the uncertainty. They let doubt occupy the space where vision should live. But when you deliberately visualize a future where you've overcome the obstacle, your brain begins to believe in that possibility. It doesn't erase fear, but it creates a stronger signal, hope. And hope is not a passive feeling. It is a neurological strategy. It provides direction, energy, and resilience. The act of visualization also taps into dopamine pathways, the chemical circuits that fuel motivation and reward. When you imagine success with detail and feeling, your brain releases dopamine even before you've taken a single step. This gives you a sense of movement and progress. It's not about tricking your brain into thinking you've arrived. It's about fueling your system to keep going. Dopamine doesn't just respond to reward, it responds to anticipation of reward. That's the science behind vision. It keeps you moving toward the image in your mind. You don't have to visualize everything. Focus on what matters most, the person you want to become, the habits you want to build, the outcomes you want to experience. And don't just see the highlights, see the process. See yourself doing the boring work, saying no to temptation, choosing discipline over comfort. That kind of visualization strengthens your mental toughness. It tells your brain, this isn't just about results, it's about who I am becoming in the process. The more detailed your vision, the more prepared your mind becomes for real-world application. Importantly, vision must be tied to values. If you visualize a life that isn't aligned with your true values, your brain will sense the conflict. You may feel temporarily motivated, but you'll also feel disconnected. That's why clarity is so important. When your vision reflects your values, your purpose, your contribution, your integrity, it creates a kind of neurological coherence. Your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors begin working together rather than against each other. That coherence is a powerful state. It creates confidence, drive, and peace of mind. The quality of your vision will often determine the quality of your action. Vague visions create vague results. Specific, emotionally anchored visions create momentum. So take time each day, even just 5 minutes, to close your eyes and see clearly. Visualize not only what you want to achieve, but how you will respond to setbacks. Visualize the feeling of finishing what you start. The smile, the breath of relief, the sense of pride. Embed those emotions deep in your mind, and your behavior will begin to reflect that direction. This practice isn't about control, it's about alignment. You are not controlling every outcome. You are aligning your thoughts and feelings with what matters most. You are training your brain to expect growth, to recognize opportunity, and to move toward purpose. Over time, this practice creates something deeper than confidence. It creates identity. You no longer just see your vision, you become it. Your brain is always watching what you give attention to. Make sure it sees a future worth building. Let your vision become a habit. Let it become your compass. And let it speak louder than your fears. Because the brain responds to vision. And the person who can see clearly even in the dark will always find a way forward. Your brain adapts to challenge. It doesn't merely react to stress or difficulty. It learns, rewires, and strengthens because of it. This is one of the most profound and empowering truths neuroscience has revealed. The process by which the brain reorganizes itself, forms new neural connections, and increases efficiency in response to new experiences is called neuroplasticity. And nothing accelerates neuroplasticity more effectively than challenge. Every time you step into discomfort, every time you choose growth over safety, your brain begins adapting in real time. It records, it refines, and it rebuilds. You may feel pressure, uncertainty, or resistance, but your nervous system interprets that pressure as a signal. Pay attention. Something important is happening. When you face a challenge, the brain activates stress-related circuits, especially the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This releases hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, which sharpen attention, increase energy availability, and prepare the body for action. But the key factor in how your brain responds is not just the challenge itself. It's your perception of the challenge. If you see it as a threat, your body shifts toward defense. But if you see it as an opportunity, your brain engages differently. It recruits executive function regions of the brain, such as the prefrontal cortex, which are involved in planning, emotional regulation, and goal-directed behavior. This mindset shift transforms challenge from something to survive into something that stimulates growth. This is why embracing difficulty is so important. Every time you engage with hard things rather than avoid them, you're literally training your brain to become more efficient under pressure. That efficiency isn't abstract. It affects your focus, your resilience, your emotional control, and even your sense of identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who can handle things, not someone who runs from discomfort. And over time, that becomes your reality, not because the world becomes easier, but because your brain becomes stronger. Neurons, when challenged, respond by strengthening their connections. This is called synaptic strengthening, and it's the neurological basis for skill development and cognitive resilience. Just like muscles get stronger under tension, your brain builds resilience when exposed to difficult situations. If you stay engaged, it's easy to think of difficulty as something to endure, but it's more powerful to see it as neural training. Every hard conversation, every uncomfortable decision, every failure faced with reflection. These are the weights your brain lifts to grow stronger. One of the most remarkable things about the human brain is its ability to reframe pain as purpose. When you find meaning in challenge, when you understand why you are enduring discomfort, your brain processes it differently. The anterior cingulate cortex and insular cortex are involved in pain perception and emotional response, and research shows they activate differently depending on whether you perceive pain as meaningless or purposeful. Purpose softens suffering and transforms it into fuel. This means when you face a challenge with intention, your brain turns pain into progress. Stress, in moderate and intentional doses, is one of the most effective ways to trigger adaptation. This is called hormesis, a biological phenomenon where a small amount of stress actually improves performance and resilience. Cold exposure, heat exposure, intense exercise, fasting, public speaking, these are all forms of hormetic stress. Your brain and body respond to these micro-stressors by becoming more adaptive. You become less reactive, more focused, and more capable of regulating emotion. Your threshold increases. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. And it's not because the world has changed, it's because you've changed neurologically. Every challenge you face also deepens your understanding of yourself. Under pressure, the real patterns emerge. You see where you hesitate, where you fall short, but also where you are strong. The brain thrives on feedback. When you reflect honestly on challenge, you create new maps of learning and growth. You give your brain the raw material it needs to evolve. And that evolution isn't just about knowledge, it's about identity. You stop identifying as someone who avoids challenge and begin identifying as someone who grows through it. One of the most underappreciated benefits of challenge is that it reveals your dormant potential. The brain has a principle called use it or lose it. If you don't challenge yourself, your capacities will atrophy, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. But when you push your boundaries even slightly, you reawaken dormant circuits. You fire up problem-solving abilities you didn't know you had. You activate focus levels you didn't realize were accessible. You build creativity not through inspiration, but through necessity. The more you lean into discomfort, the more your brain rises to meet the demands. Importantly, adaptation doesn't mean the absence of failure. It means you fail forward. Every time you fall and reflect, you strengthen neural circuits associated with learning. Mistakes, when reviewed rather than avoided, become data. They become instructions. The brain loves to learn, but it needs repetition and reflection. That's how challenge becomes a teacher rather than a trauma. That's how growth happens. Not all at once, but incrementally, layer by layer, through intentional struggle. There is a unique confidence that only comes from surviving and growing through adversity. It's not the kind of confidence you fake. It's the kind your brain wires through lived experience. Confidence born from ease is fragile, but confidence born from difficulty is durable. And the reason for this is neural. It's because your brain has built the circuits to handle difficulty. It has experienced hard things, and instead of breaking, it adapted. That becomes your internal reference point. That becomes your strength. Even the smallest act of courage in the face of challenge creates ripple effects in the brain. When you do something hard and come out stronger, the brain logs it as a victory. Dopamine is released, not just from the reward, but from the pursuit. That reinforces motivation. You are more likely to seek challenge again, and the cycle continues. This is how growth compounds, not in leaps, but in layers. Not by avoiding the hard path, but by walking it with awareness. So when challenge shows up, don't rush to escape it. Sit with it, study it, move through it with intention. Tell your brain, this is the gym. This is the training ground. You're not just facing a hard moment, you're rewiring your mind. You're teaching your brain what you're capable of. And over time, that capability becomes your identity, your baseline shifts, your nervous system upgrades. And life, while never easy, becomes something you are equipped to handle because you've trained your brain to adapt, grow, and overcome. Your habits shape your identity. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you are becoming. And your brain is always watching. It's not just what you say you want to be that matters. It's what you consistently do that leaves an imprint on your nervous system. The neurons in your brain are constantly adjusting, strengthening, and pruning connections based on your behaviors. This is why small, repeated habits carry so much weight. They may seem insignificant in the moment, but over time they create the mental and emotional framework of your identity. If you consistently choose discipline over distraction, focus over comfort, growth over fear, your brain begins to encode those choices as your baseline. You no longer just do disciplined things, you become a disciplined person. And that shift changes everything. This principle is rooted in neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change in response to experience. Your repeated actions literally rewire the brain's circuitry. If you habitually avoid discomfort, your brain strengthens avoidance pathways. If you consistently show up and do hard things, even in small ways, your brain reinforces courage and persistence. The myelin sheaths that wrap around your neurons, the biological insulation that increases signal speed, grow thicker in response to repetition. That's why doing something once isn't enough. But doing something again and again, even if it feels small, is how you condition your brain for the long game. It's how you sculpt identity, not by intention, but by execution. Each morning, the small decisions you make become signals to your brain about who you are. When you get up on time, even when you don't feel like it, your brain notices. When you start your day with intention instead of distraction, your brain records it. These micro moments matter. The nervous system is sensitive to patterns, not perfection. It learns through repetition, not exception. And over time, these repetitions don't just influence your performance, they influence your self-perception. You stop asking, "Can I do this?" and start believing, "This is who I am." That internal shift rewires your behavior from the inside out. Habits are also the most efficient way for the brain to conserve energy. The brain is constantly looking for ways to automate behavior so that it can focus its limited cognitive resources on novel challenges. When a behavior becomes habitual, it moves from the high-effort areas of the prefrontal cortex to more efficient subcortical regions like the basal ganglia. This is why habits feel easy once they're formed. Your brain is literally running a program that no longer requires conscious effort. But that same principle can work for or against you. If you automate distraction, avoidance, and emotional reactivity, those also become effortless. That's why intentional habit formation is not just helpful. It's necessary. You're always building habits. The only question is, are you building habits that serve your future or sabotage it? Identity, at its core, is the story your brain tells you about who you are. And that story is shaped by evidence. If you keep promises to yourself, showing up when it's hard, sticking to your standards when no one's watching, you give your brain evidence that you are trustworthy, capable, and resilient. But if you constantly break promises to yourself, even small ones, your brain internalizes that story too. This isn't about shame or guilt, it's about data. Your nervous system adapts to what you consistently prove. So each time you honor your habits, you are feeding your brain a new story. One of alignment, strength, and integrity. Habits also play a powerful role in emotional regulation. When your brain encounters stress, it looks for previously rehearsed responses. If you've developed the habit of deep breathing, journaling, exercising, or simply pausing before reacting, your brain is more likely to reach for those tools in the heat of the moment. That's not luck, it's training. You've conditioned your nervous system to respond rather than react, and that self-regulation practiced daily through simple habits can fundamentally change the way you navigate life's challenges. You become less controlled by emotion and more anchored in intention. The beauty of habit is that it bypasses motivation. Motivation is fleeting. It rises and falls with mood, environment, and energy levels. But habits don't require you to feel inspired. They simply require you to repeat. And repetition creates reliability. When you build habits that align with your values, you don't need to rely on willpower every day. You've already built a system that supports your goals. You don't need to negotiate with yourself every morning. You just act. And that consistency builds self-respect. Because you're no longer being dragged by emotion, you're leading with purpose. Start small, but start intentionally. 1 glass of water, 1 workout, 1 minute of silence, 1 clear intention for the day. Don't underestimate the compounding power of these simple acts. The brain loves predictability. It thrives on structure. So when you anchor your day with a few intentional behaviors, you're giving your brain a foundation to build on. You're reducing decision fatigue, increasing clarity, and reinforcing stability. And in a world that's constantly shifting, that kind of inner stability is rare and powerful. Even setbacks in habit formation are part of the process. The brain doesn't expect perfection. In fact, When you stumble and recommit, you're strengthening meta habits like resilience and self-compassion. You're learning how to course correct, how to bounce back, how to lead yourself without shame. That emotional agility is just as valuable as any external success. Because at the core of identity is not perfection, it's persistence. The goal of habit isn't to restrict your freedom, it's to increase it. When your daily actions are aligned with your values and goals, you free up mental energy, emotional clarity, and time. You stop wasting energy on self-doubt, on regret, on inner conflict. Your brain no longer needs to ask, what kind of person am I? It knows. Because you've shown it, not once, but over and over. That's how confidence is built. That's how identity is formed. And that's how transformation becomes sustainable. So don't just think about who you want to become. Act like them. Do what they would do, especially when it's inconvenient. Let your behavior lead and your brain will follow. Let your habits speak louder than your doubts. Because every day you wake up is another chance to prove something to yourself, to your nervous system, to your future. And the most powerful story you can tell is the one you live through daily. Disciplined, intentional action. Your habits shape your identity, and your identity shapes your destiny.